It all started innocently enough. My brother got engaged, and I couldn't have been happier for him. He's my little brother, and seeing him find someone who made him smile from ear to ear was such a joy. His fiancée seemed wonderful at first, a charming personality, always polite, and she had this way of making everyone feel comfortable around her. She came off as the kind of person you'd trust without a second thought. But let me tell you, first impressions can be deceiving. Soon after the engagement, she started coming over more often. I didn't think much of it at first. She'd drop little comments about how much she loved my house. Things like, "Wow, this place is so cozy. You're so lucky to have this space." I thought it was harmless. Compliments are nice, right? But then the comments started to shift. One evening, she casually mentioned how tough her living situation was. "My roommate is driving me crazy," she sighed. "And it's just so stressful right now with all the wedding planning." Course I felt for her. I've always been someone who tries to help where I can, so I said, "If you ever need a breather, my door's always open." I meant it. At the time it felt like the right thing to do. But little did I know, that simple gesture of kindness would come back to haunt me. A week later she brought it up again, this time with more urgency. "You're so lucky to have a space like this," she said, looking around as if she was mentally rearranging my furniture. "It must make life so much easier." I started to feel uneasy. Was she dropping hints? But I brushed it off. Why would she have ulterior motives? Then one afternoon everything changed. I overheard her talking to one of her friends in the kitchen while I was upstairs. They didn't know I could hear them. She laughed and said, "I've got it all figured out. I'll just use house for most of the wedding stuff. She's too nice to say no, and honestly it's perfect for what I need." What? My heart sank. Use my house. Too nice to say no. I stood there frozen, trying to process what I'd just heard. The house I'd worked so hard to make my own, my sanctuary, was being reduced to a pawn in her wedding plans. And the way she said it, so casually, so entitled, it felt like a slap in the face. First I questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Was this just a misunderstanding? But then I started noticing more signs. She began coming over uninvited, saying things like, "I just wanted to see how the light looks in here during the afternoon." Or, "Do you think this space could work for a small gathering?" Small gathering. It was becoming clear that she wasn't just admiring my home. She was claiming it for her own purposes. What really pushed me to my breaking point was when she brought it up in front of our family during dinner. She smiled sweetly and said, "Has the perfect setup for hosting. It would be such a lifesaver to have the pre-wedding brunch here." Right, everyone turned to me, expecting me to just agree. I felt cornered. I managed a nervous laugh and said, "I'm not sure about that. There's a lot to consider." Her smile faltered for just a moment, but then she quickly recovered and said, "Oh, we'll figure it out together. Don't worry." That's when I realized she wasn't asking, she was telling. After that dinner I couldn't stop thinking about it. My head was spinning with questions. Was she always this manipulative and I just didn't see it? Did my brother know about this side of her? And the biggest question of all, how was I going to handle this without causing a massive family fallout? I tried talking to her one-on-one, hoping to clear the air. I brought up the things I'd overheard and how her behavior was making me feel. But instead of apologizing or even trying to explain, she got defensive. "Wow, I didn't realize you were so territorial about your space," she snapped. "I thought family was supposed to help each other out." Her tone was icy, and her words stung. Somehow, she was flipping the narrative to make me look like the bad guy. The worst part. She doubled down. She started telling mutual friends that I was being difficult and uncooperative about the wedding. Me. Difficult. I was the one bending over backward to help her in the first place. It felt like she was trying to paint me as the villain in her story, and I didn't know how to fight back without looking petty. I couldn't believe how quickly things had spiraled. The woman who had seemed so sweet and genuine was now someone I barely recognized. I felt trapped between wanting to protect my boundaries and not wanting to ruin my relationship with my brother. That's when I realized I had to make a choice. Either I let her walk all over me and turn my home into her wedding headquarters, or I stood up for myself, no matter the consequences. And trust me, it wasn't an easy decision. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe I misheard her conversation with her friend. Maybe I was reading too much into her comments about my house. But the more I replayed everything in my mind, the harder it was to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. The next time she came over, she brought it up again, this time even more boldly. You know, she said casually, running her hand along the kitchen counter. This space is just so perfect. I've been looking at venues for the pre-wedding brunch, but nothing feels as cozy and personal as your home. I felt my chest tighten. There it was again, the same insinuation, but this time with a direct suggestion. I tried to laugh it off and said, "Oh, I'm sure you'll find a place that works." But she wasn't deterred. I mean, why waste money on a venue when we already have this? It's just so convenient for everyone, she added, flashing a smile as if that would make her words less invasive. Convenient for everyone. What about me? After she left that day, I felt completely torn. Part of me wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just excited and wasn't thinking about how her words were coming across. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. The next few weeks only confirmed my suspicions. She started coming over unannounced. One time I was in my pajamas, halfway through a cup of coffee, when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find her standing there, holding a tape measure. Tape measure. Hey, I just wanted to get some quick measurements for the dining room, she said brightly, as if this was a completely normal thing to do. I stood there stunned. Measurements? I asked, my voice dripping with confusion. Oh, just in case we need to fit a few extra tables for the brunch, she chirped. That's when I started to lose my patience. I haven't agreed to anything yet, I said firmly, trying to keep my tone polite but assertive. Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Oh, I know. I just wanted to be prepared. Just in case, she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Prepared. Just in case. Who does that? I tried to vent to a friend about it later, hoping to get some perspective. Maybe she's just excited and doesn't realize she's crossing a line, my friend offered. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just excitement. It felt calculated. Things escalated further during another family dinner. This time she brought up the idea of using my house in front of everyone. You know, I have the perfect house for the pre-wedding events, she said, her voice dripping with enthusiasm. It's so central and it has such a warm vibe. Don't you think it'd be amazing? All eyes turned to me and I felt trapped. What was I supposed to say in front of my family? That I didn't want to help. That I didn't want to be a part of her plans. I tried to deflect, saying, "We'll see. There's a lot to consider." But she wasn't letting it go. "Oh, come on. It'll be so much fun, and it'll mean so much to us," she insisted, her tone almost daring me to object. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Why couldn't she take a hint? Why did she keep pushing? And most importantly, why did it feel like she didn't care about my feelings at all? After that dinner, I knew I had to confront her directly. I couldn't keep letting this build up inside me. So, the next time she came over, I sat her down and said, "Listen, I need to talk to you about something. I've noticed you've been mentioning my house a lot lately, and it's making me uncomfortable." Her reaction. She laughed. "Oh, come on, you're being so serious," she said, waving it off like it was no big deal. But I didn't back down. "No, I mean it. This is my home, and I don't appreciate feeling like it's being taken over without my consent." Her smile disappeared, and her tone turned icy. "Wow, I didn't realize you were so territorial," she snapped. "I just thought family was supposed to help each other out. But I guess I was wrong. Territorial. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. She was turning this around on me, making me feel like I was the problem. I couldn't believe it. After she left, I sat alone in my living room, replaying the conversation over and over. Was I wrong to stand up for myself? Should I have just gone along with her plans to keep the peace? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a brunch or a wedding. This was about respect or the lack of it. She didn't respect my boundaries, my home, or my feelings. And the worst part, she didn't even seem to care. The next step was even harder. I knew I had to talk to my brother about what was going on. But how could I do that without sounding like I was attacking his fiancée? How could I tell him the woman he was planning to marry was treating me like an obstacle in her grand plan? The thought of it made my stomach churn, but I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. Every interaction with her felt like a test of my patience, my resolve, and my sanity. And the more I stood my ground, the more she pushed back, making it painfully clear that this wasn't going to end quietly. The breaking point came one evening when my brother and his fiancée came over for dinner. I was already feeling on edge, dreading what new tactics she might use to push her agenda. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. After we'd finished eating and were sitting in the living room, she casually pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "So, I've been thinking," she began, looking up at me with that same syrupy smile she always used when she wanted something. "I'd like to host a small gathering next weekend. Just to finalize some details with the bridesmaids and my planner. Here. At your place." I blinked, feeling my chest tighten. She wasn't even asking anymore, she was telling me. "Next weekend?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady even though my mind was racing. "Yeah," she said like it was the most natural thing in the world. "It won't be a big deal, just a few people. We'll keep it simple." I glanced at my brother, hoping for some kind of reaction, but he just sat there, oblivious or unwilling to get involved. My pulse quickened. This wasn't a suggestion or a request. This was her claiming my home as her own. "I don't think that's going to work for me," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Her smile wavered, just for a second before she recovered. "Oh, come on," she said with a laugh that didn't match the tension in the room. "It's just one evening. What's the big deal?" The big deal? Was she serious? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure, but the frustration I'd been bottling up for weeks was bubbling to the surface. "The big deal," I said slowly, "is that this is my home. And you keep acting like it's yours." The room went silent. My brother finally looked up, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I turned to him, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. "She's been making plans, for my house without even asking me. First, it was little comments about how perfect my place would be for the wedding stuff. Then, it was measuring my dining room without my permission. And now, she's outright telling me she's hosting a gathering here next weekend. Enough is enough." His fiancée's expression shifted from surprise to indignation. "Wow," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I didn't realize you were so possessive of your house. I thought we were family. I thought you'd want to help make this wedding special." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. "This isn't about being family or helping," I shot back. "This is about respect. You don't respect me or my boundaries. You've been treating me and my home like a means to an end. And I'm done pretending that's okay." My brother stood up, looking panicked. Wait, let's just calm down," he said, holding his hands up like he was trying to defuse a bomb. "Can we talk about this without fighting?" "Talk about what, exactly?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "How your fiancé has been manipulating me and making me feel like a guest in my own home. Or how you've been sitting there, letting it happen, without saying a word." He looked stunned, like he hadn't even considered that perspective. Meanwhile, his fiancée was glaring at me, her face a mask of fury. "I can't believe you're doing this right now," she said, her voice cold. "You're making me out to be some kind of villain when all I wanted was to include you in the wedding." "Include me?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You didn't want to include me. You wanted to use me. Don't try to spin this like you're the victim here." The tension in the room was unbearable. My brother looked back and forth between us, clearly torn. "I didn't know any of this was happening," he said finally, his voice quiet. "Of course you didn't," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Because she didn't want you to know. She's been playing nice with you while steamrolling over me. And I won't stay silent about it anymore. His fiancée stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. You know what? Fine, she said, her voice shaking with anger. If you're going to blow this out of proportion, then maybe we'll just find somewhere else to do the brunch. Clearly, your house isn't as warm and welcoming as I thought. The venom in her words stung, but I refused to let her see that. That's the first sensible thing you've said all night, I replied, crossing my arms. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving my brother and me in an awkward, heavy silence. He looked at me, his expression a mix of hurt and confusion. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked quietly. Because I didn't want to ruin things for you, I admitted, tears welling up despite my efforts to hold them back. But I couldn't keep letting her walk all over me. I couldn't let her treat me and my home like this anymore. He nodded slowly, sinking back into the couch. I need to think about all of this, he said, his voice distant. And just like that, the dam broke. The confrontation I'd been dreading for weeks had finally happened, and while I felt a sense of relief, it was overshadowed by the uncertainty of what would come next. In the end, this wasn't just about a house. It was about respect, boundaries, and standing up for myself when it mattered most. I never imagined confronting my brother's fiancée like that, but it had to be done. It's heartbreaking because I love my brother, and I wanted to support him, but I couldn't let someone take advantage of me under the guise of family. This experience taught me that it's okay to say no, even when it's hard. My hope is that my brother sees the truth and we can rebuild from here. Relationships are messy, but honesty is everything.